Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where guests share their powerful personal stories of transformation through human design. I'm Kathy Bashanko, an intuitive human design mentor and guide to radical self-trust. Join us as we explore how your human design experiment can truly change your life. Hi there, I'm Kathy Bashanko, and today I'm talking to Vickie Dickson. She's going to share her real human design story, and I'm really excited to talk to Vickie today. Vickie's a 30-year veteran of entrepreneurial, that's a hard word for me to say, entrepreneurial space. And she's a 2-4 manifesting generator. So we know what that means, right? She does all the things. So she's had just about every type of business that you can have. She's built her last 4 businesses to multiple 6 figures and lit it up every step of the way, following her sacral, I'm sure. Karen Curry Parker describes Vickie as the business whisperer, and you may know her through her work with Body Graph Chart or through her own personal brand, where she trains human design practitioners and others to clearly communicate their message so that they can build the empire of their dreams by actually getting paid to do what they do. Vickie's the host of 2 podcasts. One is Unjaded, and for human design for intentional entrepreneurs. And the newest one is The Pulse on Human Design. When she's not working, you can find her living her best Mimi life with her 4 grandchildren. And I am so excited to talk to you because I'm kind of a fangirl. I don't know if that help. I know.
So funny.
You're like, and it was so funny when I just looked at the business, the human design chart for my business and saw that it's kind of you.
Right? Yeah, that's crazy.
Designed as a cross of contagion 2-4 manifesting generator. So
yeah,
emotional authority. So there you go. Anyway, welcome, Vickie. I'd love if you just said hello and dive right into telling us how human design found you or you found it. Does that feel good?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be here. How did human design find me? I wish that I had a beautiful human design story. Like some people talk about, their human design met them or they met their human design and it was like singing. Mine was not like that. I was very confused. So I had human design came across my path in 2 different mastermind groups that I was in. And I got that I was a manifesting generator and I could be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But I also kind of thought that everybody did lots of things. I didn't really know that that was so much a me thing. And then I don't know, my daughter was really more into it than I was. She was in, I don't know, she must have been in her late 20s then. And she was really more into it than I was. And she kept she would buy these Gene Keys books and these human design books, and she would be talking to me about it. And I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't really do anything for me. I don't really get it. I had 2 human design readings and they were not very good. They were pretty dry and pretty we're just going to do these things and don't ask any questions. So it left me feeling even more confused. None of it made sense. And then I still to this day couldn't tell you why I chose to pursue it. I have no idea how that happened. It was through messaging though. It was by I was in the middle of a brand pivot, another one. And I was trying to clarify my messaging, and it was human design that brought the messaging piece together for me. So, and then from that point on, I've got 4816 as my only conscious channel. And from that point on, it was like human design is the answer to everything. I brought it into my holistic health practice. And at that time, I had 3 businesses at the same time, and I was using human design in all of them. And then it just kind of took over my life. And I still don't really know how, but that's how almost all of the best things in my life have happened. That it was just like, oh, here I am. And I don't know how this quite happened.
That's really interesting. So you're saying your daughter was into it more than you. And
Absolutely.
What's your daughter's type and profile?
That particular daughter is a 2-4 manifesting generator.
Okay.
So not emotional.
Yes. Okay. So I would imagine that the difference in the dynamic emotionally probably was that something that grabbed you right away? Like, oh, this makes sense?
No, my emotional authority, this is a lot of the work that I do with clients because, okay, I'm Gen X.
Right.
And I feel like for my entire life, Okay, I'm going to give you an example. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was 52.
Mm-hmm.
He walked into my house the day that he was diagnosed, and I had toddlers, clinging to my legs. I was home with my kids and other kids, and I had them clinging to my legs. And you know how they hide behind you and kind of look out at the person. And he stood at the front door and he said, I've just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it's your job to put me in the home when the time comes, because your mother and your sister wear their emotions on their sleeve. They're too emotional. They can't handle it. You're the stoic. And he walked out the door. And my whole life changed in that moment. And that is the summary of my emotional space in my family for my whole life. And I'm not blaming, like, we choose our experience. I believe we choose our experience. But my mother and my sister are open emotionally, and I am defined. And I'm the one that there was never space for emotions. And that, I think, is very typical of a Gen X woman, probably men too, but where there was no space for emotions. It was, if you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. It was very, you just walk through life and you just deal with it, and you're not here to be emotional. So when I found out that I was an emotional authority, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Like, it didn't compute. It took me so long. I've had coaches, and one of the coaches, he would say, how are you feeling today? I'd say, good. And he'd say, good isn't a feeling. So I actually had a coach, like, bring me the emotional scale and show me the range of because it's like none of that was me. And my husband is undefined emotionally. And if you knew each of us, you would expect him to be the emotional one. So I have never identified as someone who's emotional. And when I started studying BG5, it was brought to my attention that is completely subconscious in me. So it is the thing that forms my authority, but it's completely unconscious. So I still have to be with it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm going to back up a little bit because, people listen at various levels in their thing. So, people can't look at your chart right now. So, Vickie is defined. So she has a consistent expression of energy that goes from her splenic awareness center to her throat. That's that 1648 that she talked about. That's the channel of talent. It's all about, having the skills and the enthusiasm and working repetitively to do something, to bring it into the world, that sort of thing. And then she has other channels too, but then the other one we were talking about now is her emotional wave, but is a collective wave, which means that it's all about collective experiences. It's not an individual emotional reactivity type of thing. So, and it's unconscious, which means it's more in her body. It's not so much in her mind and her personality. But I guess what I was wondering is just the idea that, oh, wait, I'm built this way emotionally, and all these people I see as overly emotional are built the other way. And I think that sometimes people mistakenly think that it is the emotionally defined people who always react emotionally. And I've found that I have to really be out of alignment, like I told in an email I sent that I was this weekend, because I made a rush decision and then I had to continually make decisions in the moment that felt too important to have to make in the moment. And, that was causing this emotional reactivity in me to build up and build up. But what happens is it intensifies by all these undefined emotional centers. They feel it more than I do. My daughter, she literally came up. This was all I had this last weekend. We had a whole thing about getting her stuff out of storage to move her back home from Florida in between hurricanes, right? And I'm dealing with movers who are not at all like, I'm not going to go into all the details, but at one point she's coming up the escalators and she heard the conversation and she texted me. She goes, I'm in the car. She's like, just tell me if you need something. She's like, because she's undefined emotionally. So she's not going to want to be anywhere around that, right? Because she knows how it is going to be. So but we're built for that emotional consistency. So we know that we'll get through it and be okay in a way that those who are not defined, when they feel it and experience, they're like, I don't know what to do with this, right?
Yeah. And I actually had that experience this past weekend, or maybe a week or more ago, but I was in my wave. And it was one that hit me really hard. And I had to get away from my husband. So we hear oftentimes where the the person who's undefined emotionally will have to step away like your daughter did. But I actually needed to remove myself from his presence so that I could feel my emotions, because I knew he was so uncomfortable with it. I knew he was amplifying it. And it was like, if I don't get away from this, I have to have my own space so that I can actually process what's coming up, which is new for me since human design, because before it would have been just shove the emotion down and get over it and it will be fine. Whereas now I actually take the time away and make myself be in it for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really that's been my experience too, is that I used to get mad when my husband would want to walk away, and I used to use my emotional wave almost as a weapon, but it was my, I don't have the defined sacral energy, so I have my root and my solar plexus act as one group of energy centers, right? So my will, I either have my will is my energy, and sometimes it's not rested, right? And if it's like I'm trying that will and that's not working by sheer will, I have been known to use my emotional wave as a weapon. And so I've learned that if I do that, he will amplify it back and it will actually beat me up more than him. So, that breaking aura is really a big thing. Now, I noticed though that in one of your several things where you introduce yourself, you say you're an emotional or emotional manifesting generator, light on the emotional. So I feel like this is speaking to what you've been saying already. But is it because of not feeling them or not expressing them? That's not.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, because, and I'm learning to, that's another thing that I love about human design, is that it's a constant exploration and we just constantly get to go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right.
And my emotional system, understanding or experimenting with my emotional system, has been the greatest gift and the most work I've had to do with my design. So light on the emotional, because I have never allowed myself or been allowed to feel or express those emotions. And I'm the person who, people who actually know me in the world would never describe me as emotional. Never. Yeah. I'm like, no, that's not there. And then also because it's unconscious.
Yeah, but it's your design sun. So a huge part of your body, like the feeling of desire in your body, that's the gate of the clinging fire, right? It's like this huge, passionate energy.
Yeah.
And, to feel that.
And for my whole life, that's the piece of me that was the most wrong. And I find that a lot of times with people that I work with, is that your unconscious sun is such a big conditioner. And for me, it was like, you're too intense, you're too passionate, you're going after something else that you're fired up about. Don't get so fiery, all of those things, right? And it's like, that's a big piece of who I am.
Yeah. So tell me about those 2 readings that you had initially, if you don't mind. You said they were not very good. I remember, because as I've already said, I'm a big fan and I listen to all your podcasts. I think I've listened to every episode. No, maybe not all of the early episodes of Unjaded, but I've listened to a lot. And
thank you.
I've heard the story that somebody told you. Was it your first reading that told you that you were not designed for business? Which, if you know, Vickie, is the biggest lie ever, right?
That was Karen.
Karen told you?
That was Karen in my training when she first looked at my chart. That's what the first time she had her eyes on my chart. Yeah, that was her. Yeah. And then by the time we were finished in the mastermind, she was like, you're the business whisperer.
Right.
So we can't always just take the chart at face value, because we have to look at life experience and nuance. And I think that's the gift of almost all human design people that I know, is that we bring so many tools together.
Yeah.
And she probably didn't have that context when she was first saying it, because she didn't know me very well. It was in one of the levels. I can't remember which one.
Yeah. So you don't know what it was that she was looking at in your design that caused her to say that?
She was looking for business circuitry, I think. And she's like, yeah, I don't see anything here that says business. I don't think you're built for business. Yes.
Yeah. She's got, so in her, she teaches that the business circuit goes from the root, from the 54 to the 32, and then it goes from the 44 to the 26. and then from the 21 up to the 45, up to the throat. And it's interesting because you're completely open in all of that, which means you're here. You have access to all of it, right? Isn't she? It's funny because she's the one that teaches that. So I wonder if that's one of the nuances of things that have evolved with her over time as well. Because, we have this definition that we're here to make an impact specifically with, but we know that in our openness is where we gain wisdom, right? And as Manny Gens, you have all the mistakes and trial and error and doing things and skipping steps in there to really get to that. So then was that one of your first 2 readings?
No, that wasn't a reading. That was just in when we were in one of the classes when we were doing chart overview type things. Yeah. So the readings were, the first one that I had, I think that it was just that the person was really, really new to human design.
Yeah.
And she didn't say that. She led with a big price. And I think people are okay if you tell them where you're at. So when I not that you have to do it like me, but when I started my business, and I'm always talking to human design readers about this as well, like start where you're at and let that be okay. And you can tell people I've got my levels 1 and 2. And so I'm going to be doing this type of reading and this is what we're going to cover. And you know how I love the introductory price because it gives you room to expand your price. And I feel like that's what could have been done in that experience instead of, I see people charging this amount here. I'm going to charge that even though I don't know what I need to know. And there wasn't one question that I asked. And I'm not like a super, super inquisitive, going to ask you all of the tough questions and a thing, but there wasn't one question that I asked that could be answered. So I think looking back, knowing what I know now, I think maybe she only knew about the type, strategy, authority, and maybe the centers. There wasn't a lot of meat in it, and it left me kind of confused.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second one was part of a mastermind that I was in. We got, with a full pay option, we got another full reading. And it felt very much like someone was trying to make me into something based on the look of my chart. It wasn't taking into effect life experiences, or it was just like, I'm just going to tell, like, I feel like in a reading, we ask as much as we tell. Like it's a conversation, and because we want to know the person's life experience, we want to know what they've been going through. We want to know how they're using their design so that we can then give them tips, or where they're getting caught up in things that are catching them up. And sorry, there's noise out there. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I feel like that's the way most of us know how to do a reading. And this wasn't that. This was just very much like, and you know what? Again, knowing what I know now, I look back and I'm like, I think they were trying to like peg me for that next level of that program. So it's like they were telling us the things that would make us want that next level of that program, which is gross.
Oh, so she was kind of using your reading to groom you for her program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what did that teach you about, like, so when you started doing readings, I'm sure you brought some of that perspective with you into doing readings. How long ago did you start doing readings?
I think it was probably 2021, early 2021.
Okay. So that, I'm sure that those experiences impacted the way you went about it.
I think so, but I think I do readings like I do everything else. Like, I mean, I have a...
Right? Because how we do anything is how we do everything, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I do think now, that was another piece of my design. You didn't ask this, but that was another piece of my design that really gave me a lot of freedom and permission, was the quadrate thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like even today, my brain feels a little bit broken because I've had 2 full days.
Can you just tell people what that means? Quadrate?
Sure. Yes. So all of my variables, so the arrows on the sides of your head center when you're looking at your chart, all of those arrows point towards the right. So one of the things that it means in my life is that I need to be in complete flow, which sounds like a pipe dream, but I see how I have done that throughout every iteration of my career. But the thing that it means for me with learning and with delivering information is that I can often sit back and wait for the other person to ask the right thing. And then I just know, and I can just go. And people say that, and this is kind of weird, but I had a really powerful psychic meeting, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And she said to me, I need you to promise me something. I'm getting this intuitive hit. I need you to promise me that you will always say the thing that you know you're supposed to say, even when you don't know why you're supposed to say it. And I've always done that in a reading. And sometimes it's the thing that brings someone to their knees. And it's just this intuitive thing, but it's also what's pulled out of me.
Mm-hmm.
So do I use those experiences? Yes, I think we all use all of our life experience when we come into something. But it's also, and I mean that 4816 that lets me go really, really deep into like I am deep into this, and the nuances and all of those things. It's everything that just comes out in a reading or in a client session. I don't even know if I answered your question. Sorry.
No, you did. So,
okay.
And I think, and that's kind of interesting because when I started doing readings, in the beginning, as a lot of my experiment, I have an undefined crown head and completely open ajna. You have the opposite. You have the completely open head and the undefined ajna with the hanging gate 17. But I was always, worried about being able to answer all the questions and have all the info. And I very much was, I remember I'd been in a projector group, I think it was, and somebody said, well, wait, if you've had a reading, they didn't tell you that? Like a reading was supposed to include every single aspect about the design. And well, that you could talk to someone for days and not.
Yeah.
So, and there are people who, and I think even Ra used to say, you're paying me and now you're talking to me. You're paying me to talk. So, basically listen, right? And it's like, to a certain degree, I understand that part. But if a person doesn't give you any kind of info, at least even if it's in the form of an intake kind of questionnaire type of thing, you don't really know what's important right then and what to really address, and what you can be telling them stuff they already know. But I really resist that idea of I'm going to start every reading with the same things, especially because some people, think they know more than they do, and they need to hear something that's just going to come out. So I find that it's, if I, get a certain amount going, then certain things just start to come out, and I can read from a person's responses and energies, like where to go next in what I'm looking at, and just, I'm outer vision. So what I see, it's very important as I'm looking at the chart, like what jumps out at me, I really trust that.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, so I just wondered if, how those experiences did they make you, more, some people get really afraid of telling people the wrong things, just like you were told that you were not designed for business. And, that could derail some people, that could really derail them. I'm guessing it didn't really derail you because you had enough foundation in business to have the confidence, right?
Yeah, and I always have that bucking against, like, if you tell me if you tell me I can't do it, I will do it. Watch me, yeah,
right.
And I do think that about the first reader. I do think, and it's okay if you don't know. So, like, again, for a listener, if you're listening in and you want to get started, I think you just have to let people know where you're at, the things you can do in a reading. And I mean, like you said, I'm a manifesting generator. I've gotten so many things wrong in my life that I'm really good at having egg on my face and being able to work with it. I'm really good with saying, like, oh my God, I messed up, because my whole life is like, that's just the way that it is. And that's how I learn. And that's how I learn to be more efficient and all of those things. But I've built a lot of businesses, boots on the ground, just coming up through the ranks. And it's always okay to say, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. And what I learned in a couple of my businesses is that the things that you're so afraid that people are going to ask you are not the things they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you the things that you already know, because people are starting out just like we were when we were starting out with human design. They're starting out, it might be the first time they're hearing this information. So it's all overwhelming. And, you were saying something about giving people information and, you're paying me for me to talk. But I think that people only absorb so much of what we're saying. So the best way that we can serve them in these sessions, be it human design or something else, is to actually make sure that they're going to be able to integrate this information once they leave us. If we just fire hose information at them, I don't really think that's the best service that we can offer them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there is, so that was kind of my needing, my initial thoughts years ago when I was first learning about stuff was this needing to be certain that I had all the answers. And that's, that's a not self-open ajna thing, right? So like, as I really realized to just trust now, it's interesting because when I'm starting to talk about something, and if I start to think of something and I'm like, all of a sudden that info's not there, I all of a sudden just know that, okay, that's not where we're supposed to go right now. I know that I know the stuff. And if it doesn't come to me in that moment, then that's kind of a sign to go somewhere else. But you were talking about, I feel like you started to say some stuff about being quad right. And I don't know if you finished it, but because my squirrel brain, while you started talking about it, started thinking about my own variables, which is what I do sometimes. I have the two right facing on the design, on the personality side. And then I have the two left facing on the other side. And I've always felt like that's kind of like the story of my life. I'm just
going in opposite directions.
Right. Exactly. So it's like, I've got this active body. Like I'm always talking with my hands. I've always got to be moving. I do best, but you've got the 4629. So you probably need to do a lot of moving while you're talking too. So I'm just wondering, how that has really changed the way you do things, knowing that you're this passive. That sounds weird too to even say, because that sounds icky to say you're passive.
Yeah. Ross said all knowing. I like that one. I'll have to remind my husband sometimes I'm all knowing. You forgot.
What's his?
Oh, I can't remember.
He's a projector, isn't he?
No, he's a manifesting generator.
Okay.
Yeah, we are all so there are 13 people in our family now, and 12 of us are generators and mani-gens, and one we just had a manifestor born. He's 9 months old. So yeah, I know. And I'm like, oh, you poor sacral. Okay, so quad right. So one of the things that I have done since understanding and using my quad rightness is I have healed my eyesight. So I remember listening to one of Ra's lectures because variables just fascinate me for some reason. And I don't know as much about them as I would like to, but he said in one of his lectures something about quad right children having eye issues very early on, vision issues very early on. And I was in grade 3 when I started wearing glasses.
Oh, wow.
And I went through a period of my life in my 20s where my eyesight just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. There was something wrong and nobody could figure it out. And then I had laser surgery, I don't know, in my 30s maybe. But I was starting to get to the point where now I had to wear reading glasses and they were getting worse. And I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. So I know they're a pain. So I started just living like a quad right life. I did not take any notes. What course was I in at that time? I do so many, I can't even remember. But I experimented with not taking any notes. I went to a mastermind in Florida last July. And it was 14 and 15-hour days of learning. And I made a deal with myself that I wouldn't take one note the entire time. And I just sat there and got really present and let myself learn. I'm in BG5 now, and it's challenging to not ever take a note because the whole school system trains us to memorize. And I have an undefined ajna, and I'm a quad right, and it trains us to memorize and to keep all of these facts in our heads. And I don't know, all of the things. And it's like, I find even now, so the last 2 days have been heavy screen days for me. And I just said to myself before this, okay, that's it. No more screens for the rest of the day, because I know that when I have to like focus like that, like screen shares. That's why screen shares, I cannot do screen shares. I'm going to have to figure out a way for my own sessions for people who are visual, but it's just been really allowing myself to just soak things in. And then also to trust that the things will come out when they need to come out. And they do, they always do. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else could go into their brain and be like, oh yeah, I know that. It's like, here it is.
Yeah. So I will say that one of the things that has been the hardest for me to grasp is this concept of having a left active brain and body and a right active mind. I mean, a right passive mind. And I recently read something that Ra had said where it was kind of like you have this active librarian just sticking everything in there, and it's all just in there, and it needs to just be passively pulled out. But I find that because I have this need to be busy, I often will distract myself by being busy with something that will then divert my attention. So I have found that actually writing notes or doodling. I used to get in trouble for doodling in class all the time. I drew on all my books and stuff. But
it probably helped your brain.
It did. And even just write. So I found that writing notes, even if they're horrible notes, just the act of writing things down, as long as I don't have to think too much about what I'm writing, is very helpful for me too, in that sense. But okay, so you started using, so I'm going to go back to your story a little bit, if that's okay. We'll jump. Hey, just popping in for a quick sec. I know we're deep in conversation, but if you're feeling called to dive deeper into your human design experiment, I'm here to guide you. Whether it's a personalized reading or one-on-one mentorship, let's explore the next steps towards radical self-trust together. Visit kathybashanko.com to learn more. All right, back to the conversation. There's so much more to explore. So you started getting interested, learning about it. You decided to take some courses. Was the first thing you did with Karen? Because I know you did training with Karen. What was the first?
No, I went into one of Phoebe Kuhn's messaging programs. I can't remember, Content Emporium it was back then. I was one of the first students. And I went through every single one of her programs that she's ever had. I went through. And I asked in the group one time, I think it was just like a typical 4816. Oh, I wonder, how do you learn about human design? How do you get certified? Because of course I need the certification. And people recommended Karen. So I got into her world there.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then she decided by the end of whatever you were doing that we were Business Whisperer. And it is really amazing. I know now your focus has got your niched down even more, and you're really focused on aligned content creation. And that's been, I just finished doing your master class on that, and that's been super helpful. And do you feel like that was ever a conscious thing, or was that just a second line getting called out? Was it conscious to make that choice?
I think it was a little bit of both. So when I was looking back at old notebooks, like a couple of weeks ago, it was 2017, and I was teaching courses on how to create content and how to get your messaging straight before human design even came into my world. And I'm like, isn't that interesting but I feel like I needed to be called to it again. And I feel like I had a lot of resistance in me to leaving people behind. And you've heard me speak about that before, but I know maybe your listeners haven't, where I have this, like, my design really brings people with me along the path. Like, I show you the way along the way. And I have people who've been with me for 6 iterations of my business, who've been with me for over 20 years, still on my email list, still opening my emails, still cheering me on when they get my emails. And so I had a real resistance. I was the person who was bringing human design to my community. And then once I just kept really trying to hold on and serve that consumer population rather than step fully into the business population. I wanted to straddle and do both, even though I know better. So I feel like that content piece, the writing piece, has always been there. And then it's been more of a call as I've come along the way, if that makes sense. But I had to consciously say, okay, this is my flag in the sand. No more trying to serve everybody. You know better than this. Like this, it's time.
Yeah. I was looking at your chart. I was just thinking about the fact that you have cognition inner vision, whereas I have cognition outer vision. And so I know it's funny because in a lot of things that I've listened to of yours or participated in, you often talk about how you hate video and not a YouTube person. Like, you're a person who if you need something to do, you're not going to Google, you're not going to go to YouTube. You're going to go find the written instructions or the Reddit post or whatever, right? Whereas I'm the opposite. Show me step by step and I will be able to do it, right? And I like to have a written thing for the quick follow-up maybe, so I don't have to go back and watch the whole video again. And I was thinking about how that aligns with the inner vision, because the outer vision almost distracts you from how you think it's meant to be, right? So I wonder how you feel that inner vision cognition plays out in the whole content creation thing for your niche, not for someone else, but like for you choosing that. Is that
yeah, it does make sense, but I don't know how to answer that question.
okay?
Like, I wonder how that gives me something to kind of contemplate. How does that inner vision play into it?
Yeah, because I feel like you have this gift of I don't like, it's like you can kind of see where something needs to go, right? And I feel like that has to do with all of that inner vision stuff.
Yeah. In BG5 today too, I just came from that class and they were talking about that being in the 4130 as well, which I was like, oh, that's interesting to me. But he was like, very much that sees everything that needs to be done and how to do it. Like, it just has the vision. And I mean, I knew it was about having a big vision, but I didn't ever understand it as like, this is part of what allows you to do what you do and see what needs to be done.
Yeah. And then you also have the 58 on the other side of the route. So that emotional wave of imagination, desire, but also joy coming in. All right. So
yeah.
Interesting. So where are you still feeling the deconditioning process the most? I mean, I don't think we ever finish. But like, where do you feel like, what's your greatest?
I would still say the emotional center.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like there's 52 years of not feeling emotions there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's so much richness in it. And I feel like every single wave that I go through has something specific to teach me. So really allowing myself to be in it and then always playing with that expectation. I remember my other daughter said to me when she was a teenager, Mom, the key to your happiness in life is going to be lowering those expectations of yours. Now, who knew that is actually the key to my happiness back then? But that's a constant, like, going into things without an expectation is very difficult for me.
Although I would change that. I would tweak that and not say lowering your expectations.
Yes.
But I would say releasing the specificity of your expectations, right?
Yes.
Whereas, like if you, like, I don't know, do you follow Bashar at all?
Yeah.
Bashar channels, or Daryl Anka channels as being Bashar, but he talks about how this whole step-by-step process for like having these great lives and manifestation and everything. And he's like, follow your source of greatest excitement to the best of your ability. And basically release the attachment to the result, right? Like, so like doing it, find what feels good and keep doing what feels good without this, desire, like, that 4130 is, constantly being disappointed because, we're going to Disney World. It's going to be awesome. Da, 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 all this stuff. And then you get there and it rains every day. Right. And so, you're so attached to the whole thing that and then to be able to find what is this here? What is this bringing me instead? Right. What am I, that whole thing that is difficult for many of us. Right. And like, my thing now even is just, like with the experience of the stress of this weekend when I was like, because my big thing is radical self-trust right now, right? And so everything is happening for my greatest expansion, even when it sucks in the moment. So I literally woke up Monday morning and was like, oh, that's what it was for. It was to show me how it all implodes when you start by not saying, okay, I don't have clarity on this decision. And so even though everything in my mind says I should do it, I'm going to say no. and it started with that. I said yes to something that I didn't have a yes for, right? And then my whole body, the whole time, was in this place of, oh, I already screwed up and now I'm going to screw up more. Now what do I do? Now what do I do? Now what do I do? Yeah. So anyway, so then when I can take that feeling of, oh, I screwed up and turn it into, wow, look at how clear that message was, how clear that example was, right? So I feel like that, that could be very much. So, okay. I don't know. Did you want to respond to that? Because I have a tendency to like say my thing and then switch gears without caring.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on. It's releasing that attachment to, and I mean, I could give you 1,000 examples in my life of where that would have helped me.
Yeah. So, okay. So I would love to know where you, I know you said you're going somewhere with your Unjaded podcast. So I was going to say, I'd love to know where you're going. Your Unjaded podcast, you're talking about changing the name. Have you, I heard that once in a podcast recently. Did you already change it? Oh, is that what the new, there's like it feels like your tagline is a little different than it used to be. Did you tweak that?
No, it's the same.
Oh, okay.
It's the same. Yeah. Yeah. So that was one of the things where I was, like, I probably said it before, I should have maybe let it go through my emotional system.
Yeah.
But why it came about was because I was looking for a brand strategist because I'm looking at doing a bit of a rebrand. And I couldn't find exactly the thing that I was looking for. So of course I went to podcasts and I found this brand strategist podcast. And then when I got there, like none of the episodes were about branding. So I was like, okay, so do people come into Unjaded, but it does say human design for intentional entrepreneurs. But do they come in and now we're talking all about content? Should I say something about content in the name? But no one to date has submitted any suggestions. So I'm just going to like sit with it, let it percolate. If you have any suggestions, feel free to send them along. Who knows, maybe I'll get something. But I don't know if it needs to say specifically about content or messaging or not.
Well, the reason I brought it up now was because you said something about that you wanted to keep the Unjaded part because that had a special meaning to you. And I don't know that meaning. And I'm wondering where the Unjaded name for your podcast came from.
Sure. And I don't know that I would say special, but just it means something. So I had a store for 15 years and I bought it with an existing name that I absolutely hated. And then when I changed the name in order to keep continuity, because everyone just called it Vickie's, so it just became Vickie's. And I never liked it, but that's what people called it anyway. So I really wanted to have a name for my podcast that people would actually use on swag. So when I launched the podcast, I had mugs made up with Unjaded. I wanted it to be cool. So I was at the cottage. I was trying to find this name for, I don't know. Well, I was 6 weeks from when I thought of a podcast to when I released it. So for 6 weeks, I was thinking of like, what is this name going to be? And I was at the cottage and jade is a crystal that I love. Jade is a stone that I love. And I was holding my jade and I was listening to Alanis Morissette. And what's that song? Oh, one hand in my pocket and the other one given a peace sign. That song was playing. And I was like, this is it. This is the vibe that I want for my podcast. And I looked in my hand at the jade and I'm like, it's going to be Unjaded because I want people to be unjaded. I want people to understand that we walk through life. I believe we choose our experiences and that everything is happening for us to grow. So let's not be bitter and frustrated and disappointed in all of the things that we can be. Let's just stand in it, learn from it, and grow. So that's how I came up with Unjaded.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I will see if I get any downloads for little tweaks on that to make it more content. Because you are really you're kind of the content whisperer, even more so than the business whisperer, because you really do help people to hone in. And I'm wondering if there is a specific place you see that being in your design, because I know everything is a compilation of everything, but is there something that you think really gives you that energy or that focus?
I don't know about in my design, but it has been my entire life. Like I have been writing for my entire life. It's the thing that I most wanted to do when I was a child. It's the thing that if you were searching for me, I would have read a book more than do anything else in my life as I was a kid. That was really weird grammar. And it's continued for my whole life. So I think it comes from a real love of writing and a love of language. And actually, when I was 18, I went to a career counselor because I couldn't decide what I wanted to do in life because I had to pick one thing and I couldn't decide what that one thing was supposed to be to go to college or university. And he told me to be a linguist. And I was like, what the heck would I ever do with that? And he's like, you're meant to work with words. Words. So there were two things, or retail. And I remember thinking, who the heck would work in retail their whole life? And then I worked in retail until I was like 42.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, like retail, so those sales and linguistics. And it's just always been there. I don't know. Do you see it in my chart?
Well,
this love of language?
Well, I mean, you've got a lot of activations on your throat, and you have it defined by the 4816. So that's all about skills, and enthusiasm, and then you have that gate of the storyteller, gate 56. So, but I'm always really drawn to the gate 8, and I'm trying to see where is that in your design, because I know so it's your.
That's my son, conscious son.
I knew it's your conscious son, but on the design side, it's your Saturn.
Oh, okay.
So, I was just trying to see that there. So, because I saw you have it in both. So I always think it's interesting when people have, because my throat is so uniquely defined by my 1/8. It's the only activation on it. So I always like to look when people have a channel that defines it, then they have these other activations on there, right? So you're bringing in, all of this like storyteller enthusiasm, yet skills. And I think that gate 8 as your conscious son, that whole voice of what am I going to contribute? And I can only do it when I really am uniquely doing it as me, right? That feels like it's very aligned with a lot of different things, but I can really see how that really gives you this skill set with all of your experience to help people to really see how to make their unique contribution as themselves through the way that they language things and tell their stories and then that gate 31, that's a south node. I'm not sure how that plays into all of that in there, but that's your part of your environment also. So that environment of, the support, the army, right? I don't know. What does any of that feel like to you?
Yeah, it feels, I'm just sitting back kind of loving it because how often do we get people to read our charts?
Right.
So right. I love it. I'm like, okay, give me all of it, Kathy. Yeah. And I do think that gate 56, I think it's my conscious south node, correct? So it's like a natural genius that's just always been there. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's your, the gate 56, right? Yeah. So those are two nodal south node, both your south nodes. So they're just kind of there for you, right? And interesting. I always find the chart very interesting. And it's when people tell you this is what this means, it's really hard when you're not looking at the context of who they are. It's often easier to see this is where I see this thing in you. And so like if you're having a struggle with something, I find that's when I can say, well, this is probably where you're feeling it, but this feels like low end expression, that sort of thing. But, it's funny because you get people who are very logical, like my husband. He's like, he wants you to prove it by telling him something in his chart, right? Like that's there. And it's like, doesn't work that way. Took me years to understand why he's a pure manifesting generator, 3420, right? And he has a completely undefined solar plexus. So he's very much a yes or no person, right? But the man won't say yes or no to save his life. But that's because he has the 1762. So as soon as you ask him a yes or no question, in drops the question. This is the information I need. I need this information first. I cannot tell you because I cannot integrate this information, right? That's part of the integration circuit until you tell me this. Now tell me this. And he's all about the questions. It's so funny.
Oh.
And I used to be like, his sacral is broken. Right. But nothing is simple. Nothing is so, simple forward.
No, and that's why, like, when people just say, well, you're a projector, Kathy, so blankety blank blank. It's like, no, because the chart just layers upon itself. It's like so many layers. And yeah, like you said, context, like it all just comes together.
Yeah, when I had the probably the most validating little thing that ever happened with me for a read was one time Bella Crystal and Ashley Nicole were doing something. I don't know if you're familiar. They have a website called 64 Doors, and they incorporate a lot of gene keys and human design stuff. And they're both super knowledgeable. And they were doing something about Jupiter, and it was when I was going through my 5th Jupiter return or something like a year or two ago. And so they wanted charts just in general where they were going to talk about Jupiter gates. So I was like, oh, do mine, please. And I sent it in. I got on that free call specifically because of that timing. And they didn't know me then at all. And they were like looking at my chart and they're like, oh, look at her chart. She's a projector, but I bet she doesn't even feel like a projector. Look at that. Because I have both my sun gates are hanging gates on my undefined sacral, right? And I've got the 59 3 times on my undefined sacral. I've got the 9 on my Mercury on my undefined sacral. And then I have all the other motors defined, right? So it's been very interesting to see how that plays out because I so easily have this activation. It's all about right relationship. And am I making in the right connection to use this sacral energy? Am I knowing when it's not the right connection and I should rest and not, push? Not use my solar plexus as a weapon, right? But that whole understanding of it, and I go to these conferences and things where I'm like walking around with people and I'm like, why are all the generators in bed? I'm like, let's go dancing, right? I'm like, I've got more energy but I don't necessarily have it in the morning. I don't get replan in the morning the way that everybody does. So really understanding, the differences has been really, and not letting anybody, that's, I think for me, the big thing is to tell people that human design is not going to tell you about yourself. Human design is going to give you a tool to understand yourself so that you can trust yourself, but you're the only one who knows about you, right? And a person who's doing a reading is going to help guide you back to yourself. If they're telling you that you don't know what you're talking about and that you should listen to them, then I usually say run.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I think human design is the ultimate invitation back to yourself because it shows us who we are here to be. And it also, as a reader, you can look at that person in front of you and their chart and see, oh my gosh, like I always look at it as I'm looking at a newborn baby or a 4-year-old person, like how they came into the world and how the world batted this person around. Because you can see that in the chart. You can see the places where they're here to be gifted, and you can see how the world chipped away at them. And that's powerful when we are all able to step out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes courage.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was just looking at, because I didn't run a connection chart between us. At first I was thinking that you bridge all my splits, but no, I think we still have the root and we both have the root and the solar plexus separate still. So I don't bridge your splits nor you bridge mine. So that's interesting. We bridge one of my splits. So, and I always, there was something, I brought that up because I've been contemplating that a lot lately because I'm a triple split. And as a triple split, I need lots of different connections, different ways of connecting. And I've realized that that's probably why I've never been somebody who can just say, oh, I'm going to follow, like Karen Curry Parker says, she doesn't follow anybody else. She just does her own thing now, whatever. And I know you don't either. But even when you were training though, she just, my thing is like when I'm learning, like I like to get lots of different ways of doing things from different people and not necessarily have, clearly not make anyone guru, but just say, well, I subscribe to Chetan Parkin's School of Human Design, or I subscribe to, you know what I mean? And I think that my triple split might have something to do with that. But how do you feel? What do you feel you get from your split? Like what kind of insights have you gained on your personal?
That's probably an area that I could play in more. My husband bridges my split. He has gate 3, so he bridges my split. And I mean, I'm home almost all the time by myself, unless I'm with my grandkids, because I work from home as well. So one of the ways that I use my split to need to assimilate with other people is that I will go to a coffee shop and work. Like if I'm really, I'm a super self-sufficient.
Yeah.
That's just how I've always moved through life. And I think it's a combination of things, right? It's the life experience that I had in my childhood. It is being the oldest child. It is being a manifesting generator, all of those things. So I don't really feel a lot that, oh, I can't get my energy going. I rarely feel that. But if I do, it's usually within my creative process. And it could be a day where I where I want to create 30 social media posts. So I will go to Starbucks because that's the coffee shop that we have here. I'll go to Starbucks and I'll get some things done. But in my regular life, I don't really think about it a lot. Now, I know also though that those gates are great conditioners or could be great conditioners for me. So, difficulty getting things started. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I think that's you that said that this morning on a call that we had, that like you're an expert at getting things started. Like I can get things started all day long.
You also have that 53 starting energy. So yeah.
And manifesting generator.
Yeah. And that 18, I wonder, I thought about that because I had been looking at your chart before I listened to all those podcasts when you were doing the daily drop or whatever, and you shared one about criticism. And I was like, I wonder if that's any gate 18 conditioning coming in here that's making you talk about the criticism.
Could be.
Right? That's a condition for you is, how do you feel about criticism in general? Do you feel like you are like no criticism, or do you feel that it's, I don't know, I'm curious how you feel that gate might condition you.
I feel like a lot, probably. I feel definitely sensitive to criticism, definitely. And I grew up in one of those families where it was never enough. If it was an A+, it was, why didn't you get the bonus question too? And like there was a lot of criticism in my young life. And so, yes, I feel like I am sensitive to criticism for sure. Yeah. And then I criticize myself more harshly probably than anyone.
Yeah. I think we all do that though, don't we?
Yeah.
My husband has that whole channel, the 1858. And so one time I was using that to explain to him why he was supposed to not tell me how to do things. He was supposed to use that to make the world a better place, right? And then he was like, well, you do that more than I do. And then I thought, I probably amplify that energy like crazy, don't I? Because I feel criticized, I feel that energy. And it's interesting too, that I noticed that he doesn't even have to do anything. I have learned to recognize that my mind is telling me he's criticizing me when he isn't saying a thing. So I'm sensing that energy in there. And that's been fun. The more I can be like, isn't it interesting that I feel like right now he's thinking I should not be doing what I'm doing and I should be doing this thing that I think that he probably would prefer I would be doing right now, right?
And he hasn't said a word.
No, but he also has a defined ajna. So, he just has to think something a lot of times and pick it up too. So, anyway, so it has been really good chatting so far. And I just wondered if we have any things that you feel are important to your story that we haven't got to.
That's a really hard question for Manny Jen to answer.
I know it's not. Is there something else you want to tell us?
Ooh, I could tell you so many things. No, I don't think so. Was there something else though that you had wanted?
Well, I had been curious about, you are, I know you through Facebook groups, like it's a body graph chart group that is an amazing thing. And if you are anybody who's in the human design field, even if you are not using body graph chart software yet, which one you should be, and message me and I'll send you my affiliate link. It's amazing. But even if you're not using the software, just joining the group, one, to learn why you want to use the software, and two, just for Vickie's feedback is amazing. But you've mentioned several times about how you left Facebook for a while, wondered, and you've never really shared the story. And since this is all about stories, I wonder if this might be the place for you to tell everyone about why you left Facebook and mainly live on Instagram other than these groups.
Sure. Well, I used to have a really big world in Facebook. I built a lot of my businesses that I built using Facebook as the way to get the word out there. So I had a fairly large following for a little introverted person from the middle of nowhere in Canada. And 2020, I don't know, if you're listening and you remember that 2020, there were some difficult times in 2020 and some crazy things happening in 2020 and beyond. And Facebook became a place that was not fun to be on. It became, in my world where I was, it became, there was a lot of drama, there was a lot of hate, there was a lot of division. And I made it more about Facebook maybe than I should have. But I felt like when I got out of the energy of Facebook, I didn't have that energy in my life.
Yeah.
I had people wishing me dead. I had people wishing me, if I went to the hospital, I should die and not have a place there and all of these things, and saying those things about my family. My daughter was pregnant at the time. My granddaughter was born in April of 2020. And the hatred and division, I just couldn't. And then I was in the health field then. So I was in holistic health, and we had all of these people who know nothing about health being health experts online and telling all of their friends to do all of these things. And I had a really hard time as a health professional to not be able to say the things that I felt I needed to say. And I try to be, how I am with words. I try to be very careful with my words. I try to be nurturing. That gate 27 nurturing energy is in my Mercury and my unconscious Mars. And I felt like I was getting batted around. It just felt like such toxicity that I removed myself. I didn't really understand Instagram, and I don't do things in a pretty way. Like, you have such a great sense of style and making things pretty and everything when you're doing them online, right? And for me, it's like my Instagram always feels like it's a dog's breakfast. And I could get away with that more on Facebook. Seriously, like it kind of bothers me. But I was in the middle of this brand pivot as well. So how long do we have for this story? I had March 3rd, 2020. I had the misfortune of opening a retail store. Crystal, well, it was a bunch of things, but crystals were my thing, and I had a nutrition consult space in there as well. And there were 4 partners. I was one of 4 partners. And my oldest friend, we opened June 20th or something, reopened after the lockdowns, the first set of lockdowns. And my oldest friend died of an aneurysm on the 24th after a staff meeting. She was one of the partners. Wow. And the whole thing between the lockdowns and her death, it just fell apart. Yeah. And yeah, there was a lot going on at that time. It was my Chiron, like there was just so much going on at that time. And then all of this toxicity, and I chose to rebrand myself because it felt for me very much as a manifesting generator, like it was another thing I failed at. It was, like this business had to close. We kept it going for almost a year, I think. But this business had to close, and oh, here she goes again. There she is trying something new. Is she really doing that? In the middle of all of that, I started going through for integrative medicine to become a doctor. Like it was just crazy. It was all of these. Had I known about now it's going to be these people. People are going to be listening, thinking, "Who is this person?" But this is manifesting generator pathway, right? And I didn't know my emotional system, so I didn't know to wait. I didn't know to lean into it, to really process these decisions before I put a $7,000 deposit down on another program, right? Well, I'm in the middle of, I have 2 other businesses, and it was just so crazy. Yeah, I was making decisions from a very emotionally raw place, and I was grieving. So my life has been such that my friend who died, she was the only person who was still in my life who witnessed my childhood. She was the only person who was there. And so that was still in my life. And I just felt so lost. And then I had all of this hatred coming at me. And then this failed, I don't consider it a failed business. I mean, what the heck else we were closed for like 8 out of 12 months, but all of these things were adding up. And so I was using human design at that time, and I was using it with my health clients. And I was like, this is magic. This is actually the thing, because people are coming to me for their health, but it's their purpose that they're looking for, or it's their energy that they need back, or they need to sleep. And I can do it with human design as well. So when I went over to Instagram intentionally, it was that, I don't like this way I'm going to say this, but this is how it felt in my body at the time. It was like I could be someone else there. I could reinvent myself, and I didn't have to bring all of this crap and serve all of this. I live in a very small town as well. I'm 9,000 people here, and I've always been a public figure here. So it felt very much like the stoning was happening. So moving over there in my mind, I worked with a coach. I was working with a coach afterwards, and he's like, that's not Facebook, right? That's actually the world right now. But for me, it felt that's what I made it mean.
Yeah.
And that was a very long answer. But
no, but it was really good. I appreciate you sharing about that, because I do know that was probably around the time that my experiences with Facebook very much changed. And I started going and actively choosing not to see people. I personally don't unfriend people unless they've done something really bad. But generally speaking, and there were some of those, but generally I just started hiding people. And then I also stopped posting anything or commenting anything that would engage in ways that were that way. And because I really believe that, we just have to keep the most important. My sister really helped me to understand this. It's like the most important thing to guard is our own personal frequency, our vibration. So keeping our vibration high. And so hey, if that's what you had to do, but I love that you're back and in certain groups at least. And, maybe it's time to think about, cultivating a new way, because, people there's a lot more acceptance of things now than there was. I think a lot of people are still assholes, I'm sorry, in the way they engage, but there's also a lot of people who realize how badly everything was handled. And even people like, some will just double down, but some people realize that, maybe we were unfairly harsh with people who we disagreed with. But we also know that there are powers that are consistently, like even now with the hurricanes, planting ideas out there to keep us arguing about politics rather than helping each other, right?
Exactly.
So, And so I feel like, I'm just there trying to keep the vibe high, but I do understand that. So if people want to work with you, I know by the time this airs, you will have closed your doors on this, I believe, because we're releasing Monday, and I didn't even think about that. You're closing your doors on this content by creation prior to that. But what's the best way for people to work with you other than that?
Sure. So if you're okay with it, I'll just say a word about content by design, because you said Monday this will come out. Yeah. So my signature experience is content by design, because it is more than a course. It's like 8 weeks in the room where we look at your human design and your business and your content and all of the things. It is a content course. So we look at leveraging your human design to say what you came here to say so that you get paid. But we end up working on all of the things in your business. So the doors do officially close on Saturday, but I do always send out one last little bit of information the first of the week, because I know as an emotional authority how it feels. That's how I know if I should have bought something, is if I want to kick my own ass when I didn't buy the thing. So I always, like a couple of days later, just say, hey, just in case you missed it. So I've also got some exciting new things coming up before the end of Q4. And you can find me on Instagram and my podcast. I'm not hard to find other than if you're looking on Facebook.
Right. Yeah. So, and we'll have all Vickie's content contact info. But for those who are listening and driving and aren't going to go back and look at it, the easiest way, just one place to find them that they can remember is what?
VickieDickson.com.
There you go. Awesome.
And both names are spelled weird.
So it's Dickson. It's not like Nixon version of Dixon. Okay, I get it. And Vickie is IE. Okay, Vickie. So I really enjoyed our chat. I want to thank you profusely for giving me some of your very valuable time. I know you've been a busy bee today, and I'm glad your voice held out after all the things you've done. So
thank you for having me here. It was really fun to get to talk to you. It's been a long time.
I know.
Since we said we would do this, so thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So, okay, well, peace out, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Real Human Design Stories. I hope these stories help you see how human design can reframe not only your own story, but also the stories you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to tell a more empowered story about who you came here to be, I invite you to explore ways to work with me directly at kathybashanko.com. Supporting this podcast is easy. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, like, comment, and share with your friends. This helps the podcast grow the most. You can also become a contributing sponsor for as little as 99 cents a month. Details are available at realhumandesignstories.com. Thanks again for being here. Real Human Design Stories is created and hosted by me, Kathy Bashanko, and produced by Number 3 Productions. Peace out, everybody.